Let's flip a penny. You're either going to get a heads or a tails. So you flip that penny once. You've got two options. One is you can get a heads, and the other is you can get a tail. If you flip that penny twice, you might get a heads and a heads. You might get a tails and a tails. You might get a head and a tails or a tails and a head. Okay, those are your options. If you flip that penny 3 times, you could either get a head, and a head. They're all 3 heads. Or you could flip it and you get a tail, and a tail. 3 tails, and I'm a little off my screen here. Okay. You could get 2 heads, maybe a head and a tail, or maybe you could get a head, a tail, and a head, or a tail, a head, and a head. So there's 3 different ways you could get 2 heads. Is that okay? Then you might get 2 tails and 1 head. So you might get a tails, and a head, or a tails, a head, and a tails, a head, a tails, and a tails. 3 different options there. Okay. Can I do the same thing 4 times? What's going to happen? Maybe I get 4 heads. Maybe I get 4 tails. That's going to be off the picture. But let's see, is there a way of getting 3 heads and 1 tails? How many different ways are there? See if you can fill out this next row yourself. Just to clarify, so 3 heads, 1 tail, and the heads might appear in the first, you might go heads, and then get a tail. Maybe you get a heads, tails, and the heads, and so forth. So there's actually 4 different ways you might get 3 heads and 1 tails. What about the next would be 2 heads and 2 tails? How many ways can you get 2 heads and 2 tails? And is there a nice way of organizing this right here? So go ahead, try that now. I got 6 of them. How many did you get? Now let's try this other way. This may be a little bit more symmetric, but here we've got, 4 heads, no tails, 3 heads, 1 tail, 2 heads, 2 tails. So over here we'd have to think about it's possible to get 1 head and 3 tails. What are all the different ways that you can get 3 tails and 1 head? Go ahead, try that one. How'd that go? Is that okay? Is that what you got? Maybe you have them different orders, but just make sure that those are there in the same way. Any observations? If you've got any observations about what might be happening, record it or say something or whatever, because there's something really cool going on. Let's flip it 5 times and then see if we can see the pattern there. So if I were to flip 5 times, I want to start by saying, okay, it's possible to get 5 heads. It's possible to get, and then let's next do 4 heads and 1 tail, then 3 heads and 2 tails, and so forth. Make out that next row. See if you can do that. I started off on us, but I started us off on it, but it got a little crazy. Look at that list. So let's actually, any observations? Anything cool? I stopped writing, and let's actually say why. I've got, those are all the heads, and this is 1 tail. Now, if I want to see 1 tail and the rest head, so if I wanted 1 head and all the rest tails, it would look just the same, except I'd switch the, the H's for the T's. And the same thing here, that if I'm looking at 3 heads and 2 tails, I've got this list generated, and then I'd want to switch that to be 3 tails and 2 heads, and I could just reverse the H's and the T's, and it would be the same. Any other observations? Let's think about how many possibilities occur for each position. So I'm going to box the positions, and then we'll count how many possibilities are in each. So we're going to count how many possibilities are inside each box. So there's 1 possibility of getting a heads here, 1 possibility of getting a tails. There's actually 1 possibility, that 2 is not right. 1 possibility, that's a 1. Does it look like a 1? 1 possibility of getting 2 heads. It's only 1 way that can happen. There were 2 ways it could happen here, and 1 way I can get 2 tails. What about down here? 1 way I can get 3 heads. There was 1, 2, 3, and then 3 ways I could get 2 tails. And then 1 way I can get all 3 tails. Do you see it now? Let's keep going. 1 way that can happen. 4, 6, 4, 1. Does it keep going that way? You bet. What's it look like? 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can count them, we get 10. And then there's going to be 10 possibilities here because all we're doing is switching the H's and the T's. And then, yeah, it's generating Pascal's triangle. How cool is that?